Hi, my name is Rem, and welcome to the first episode in this new series building real-world web application using React and Node.js. So before we begin, I want to thank all of you for your encouragement and good comments and 120 likes. I pretty appreciate it, very appreciate it. So thank you. And let's get down to it right away without any further ado. So here I created a new repository for our project, Bookworm React. We're going to have Bookworm API as well later. And for now, this is just the empty project. And I created one issue here. User logs in. So we're going to start with user authentication and registration. So no matter what application we're going to build, these features are essential, I think, for 99% of web apps. So here, as you can see, I created marvelous mockup. So as you can see, it's very easy. Not easy, it's simple. It's what you usually see. We have a home page with the join for free and login buttons. And what we're gonna develop right now is this workflow. Clicking on login, we go into a separate route here on the login route, and there we have a form. And when we log in successfully, user is redirected to dashboard. And there are a couple of things that we need to implement as well. First of all, dashboard route should be authorized, so only authenticated users can go to the dashboard. And here we have the conditional content. If user is authenticated, we render one thing, and if he is already authenticated, we render go to the dashboard. So this is the basic stuff, and that's a good way to start. But we start with empty folder, so we have nothing. So there are a lot of setup, and so I think that this feature will take us maybe about 2-3 episodes. And first episodes I'm going to create pretty short. I'm thinking about 30 to 40 minutes, something like that. And when I get momentum, they maybe will get a little bit longer, maybe hour and a half. Okay, so what do we need to do to accomplish it? So here is just the simple list of things that I need to do and what we're going to cover. This project, this Git repository, is private now, but I will make it public when I publish this video online. Okay, so let's get started. So first of all, let's create folder. We call it Bookworm, and inside of it, make there Bookworm. And inside of it, we're going to create all of our projects. And the first one, we're going to create React app, let's say Bookworm-React, because we're going to have Bookworm-API, and maybe in the future, Bookworm-Mobile React Native. So that's going to take some time to install. At the time of recording, React version that I use right now is 15.6. But as we go along and 16th version comes up, we're going to upgrade. And yeah, today's date is 30th of August. So just to be sure. Okay, so project is ready. So let's cd into it, and let's open it in editor. I'm going to use Sublime Text right now in the beginning, but there is a big possibility that I'm going to switch to another editor, because I switch them in real life quite often, maybe once in 2 months, just to keep it fresh. Okay, so first thing that I want to do is to set up eslint. So let's create eslint RC file. And inside of it, I'll use eslint config snippet that I have for almost all of my React projects. And this config based upon Airbnb and Prettier. So I use Prettier. It's an excellent tool. And 2 days ago, they come up with 1.6 version that formats the thing that I really like how it's done. Before that, I was, but now it's perfect. Yeah, and I do not need to think about formatting, which is a huge win. So yeah, here I have the thing that I need to install. So I'm gonna just run it. These are basic things. Let me, sorry for that. This is basic things. So we have eslint, we have prettier, we have config, Airbnb, and some plugins. And you can find them in the Git repository in package.json file. What is important is the version. So I use 15th version of Airbnb config. And this plugin li is 5.1, not 6. I had some problems with the later version, so I stick to these ones. Okay, so now we have it installed. Believe it or not, it is working. So if I go to app.js in our component, it should tell me that yes, we have a class while we should have a function here. Okay, easy to fix, just delete all of this. And let's define constant app to be a function that returns a div with hello world. And we can delete these 2 lines of code and of course component. So very clean. Next, let's remove all the files that we do not need, like this. So I'm gonna have delete file. Yep. Test goes down the drain as well. CSS. And the last one is logger. Okay. So in index.js, we do not need to use this, import this index.css file, delete it, good. So now let's go to package.json, and here in scripts, let's add the lint command to be eslint source. So this way we can run it, and let's run it. So here I'm just gonna run yarn run just lint. Yeah, we have errors in register service worker file that was supplied to us by React team, so I do not want to fix it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open it and I will just disable it. eslint disable, like this, fixed, just like magic. So yeah, we green. So let's initialize Git repository and let's add it as initial commit and eslint setup. Okay, now we are ready to implement our project. But before we do that, actually, if we go to see in my mockup, you can see that we have 2 pages, home page and login page. And what it means is that we need React Router, because we need to navigate between these pages. So let's install and set up React Router. So for that, let's run yarn add React Router. And the version I think is 4.2 right now. Let's have a look. Yep, 4.2. Now in editor, in our index.js file, let's import our browser router from React Router DOM. And now we just need to surround this app with it. So we're gonna have this browser router like this. Save. Something went wrong. Yeah, that's not good. Yeah, and this is the good thing, that I do not need to think about how to format it. I just add it, wrap it, save it, and Prettier does all this job for me, which is awesome. So here is Linter wants us to be more specific. He wants us to specify React DOM in React Router DOM in package the JSON file. So let's yarn add React Router DOM just to please the machine, and that should fix it. So now we have router available to us in our application. So let's go to app, and our app component is going to be like a route dispatcher. So basically it will just render the thing dependent on the route. So instead of this hello world, we're gonna have route path, and path is the home page, and we want to make the exact match for this particular path. And the component that we're gonna use, we're gonna call it home page, like this. So we need to import route from React Router DOM, And then we need to import, of course, homepage from, let's say, components, pages, homepage. That's where we're gonna store all our pages. And this way we know that the page component is always have the things that router provides, like match, etc. So now let's create one. So here we create components folder. Inside of it we'll have pages, and inside of it homepage.js file. So that's going to be a functional component without any props for now, and we're going to have here homepage. Okay. Good. Now we have homepage, and inside of this homepage we'll have the link to login. So let's add link to login route. And let's add class name. Oh, class name, yeah, we need to install. So we have link to login like this. So now we need to import link from React router DOM. Bam. It's good. Now we need to create this route and this page for this route. So let's go to back to homepage, and let's duplicate this stuff here called login, and that's gonna be login page. And here we'll do the same thing, login page, and here as well login page. So now we need to create one, in components pages we create login page.js. Let's make it functional component and just add h1 login page. Okay, so this should work, so I hope. So let's go and run yarn start. Moment of truth. We have homepage, clicking on login, we have login page. Nice and easy. Okay, so let's commit this change. I use git savvy in Sublime, so I'm gonna use it in this series as well. So I'm gonna just add everything to staging, then I'm gonna commit it, and I call it React router setup with a couple of pages. Okay, so now let's also install Semantic UI. I'm just really a fan of this CSS framework. I like it much more than Bootstrap. And one of the good things in Semantic UI is that it has React components. So it has React support, like official React support. So we can use very cool components that they provide, and without any jQuery, and we do not need to do anything, basically. So let's install it. To install it, we need to install React, Semantic UI React. So I'm gonna do it right here. Yarn add Semantic UI, and also Semantic UI CSS. We can use CSS from CDN, but I prefer to do it this way in case something wrong with my network connection. So as you can see, we can use CDN, but let's install Semantic UI CSS, and then we just need to import this CSS in our files. So let's go to index.js here, and let's paste it here. Oh, React. Oh, React done. Everything's good. React Rocker. Okay. So now let's restart our server just in case, and let's go to our page, and you can see that style has been changed to different fonts, etc. Another thing that it's very close to margin, so it has no margins. Let's add container around it. So I'm gonna go to app.js here, and here just add class name UI container. Okay. So this way, oops. Yeah, we have some margins around our content. Nice. So that's Semantic UI. So let's git status and commit this change. Semantic UI setup. So now we're ready to create our login form. So in our login page, right here in pages, we have login page, and this page will render login form. Login form, and it will pass submit function and into it. So login form will take some function, gather data from the form, and pass this data into this function. So the form itself doesn't know anything about what's gonna happen with this data, right? It just passes along, and that's it. So now we have this login form. Let's import it from login form. We'll create forms folder, and we have login form there. So now we need to create one, forms login form.js, and the form component will have state. So we're gonna have class component here. So we're gonna use Redux in this application, and there are a couple of ways to do this, and some people like to store everything in Redux. I'm not one of them. I do not like this approach. Especially with forms, I do not like to store form state in Redux store only when I really need it. Because most of the time, when you have form, you do not need to store this data that user entered there. We're just interested in submitting this data. So, but only when I need to have very functional, very super cool and smart form, only then I connect it to Redux. In login form, no. So we'll have login form here with some state. And the state, usually what I do with forms, I have data, and data is it's an object that will store all data, the form data. We'll have loading state, which is false by default, and we have errors object that is empty by default. Now let's also import form and button from Semantic UI React. So instead of this div, we're going to use form, and inside of it form we'll have button primary login. Okay. So this is the beginning. As you can see here, login form. Here we have login form just with one button. Okay, so what do we need from the form? First of all, we need state, and this state will be changed when user types something in the form fields. Then we need to validate this data, and if this data is okay, we're gonna send it to the submit function that is provided to this form. So in login form, we'll have just two fields, email and password, empty fields. And now in form itself, we're gonna create this form fields. With Semantic UI, we'll just use form field, and inside of this form field, we'll just use regular label for email. I'll say email, and here we'll have regular input. Type gonna be email. ID is also gonna be email, just to make happy this label. Name gonna be email as well. And then we need to provide two things. We also have placeholder equals to example at example.com. We want to be very specific. When I save it, you're gonna format it, nice. And now we need to provide onChange and value to control this element by React. So we'll have value to be equal to this data email, and I don't like it. Oh, this state data email. That's a mouthful. So what I prefer to do in render method, I just deconstruct it here, or destructure. I don't know what the actual term for this. And I'm gonna take data from this state. And this way, I do not need this stuff here, so I have just data.email. And the second thing is onChange. This onChange. So let's create this onChange. So we're not going to do this every time we create the form, because I just show you in quickly how I compose forms. And in my usual workflow, and you will see it later, I just have a lot of snippets and I just do these forms like that. Okay, so on change, we get event, and we'll do this set state, and we set in state, we need to change data. But first of all, we need to save everything that we already have in data. For that, we use spread here, this state data. And then what we actually want to change, and that stores in eTarget.name, and it equals to e.target.value. Let's save it, and it will format it for us. Cool, right? Cool. Okay, so this is the onChange event, and this thing is universal for string data, for string types. So I could say like onChange email, and then do the same thing with onChange password, onChange another thing. But if I have a text field, I just use this onChange universal event handler. If I have something else like numbers or drop-down list, then I create separate change handlers for them specifically. Okay, so this is it. So now we need to duplicate it and change email here to password. Here we'll make it password, password, password. Here we'll make it secure. And that's it. We have our form. Boom. And Google Chrome just pre-populated it. Nice. So we have form. Now we need to submit this data to our function. So to do that, on form, we define onSubmit equals this onSubmit. Submit. And here I'm going to define onSubmit. And it will take nothing. So what we want to do, we want to validate data, pass it to submit function, and then handle error cases in case we have error cases from the server, for example, from asynchronous. So first of all, we need to validate. To validate, I using this stuff. So I just define errors to equal this validate, and I pass this state data to this function. So this function that we're going to define in a moment will return errors object to us. And if there are no errors, this object will be empty. So right after that, we do this set state errors. So we update our state with errors. So if there are some, we're going to display them. And we do not do anything else if we have errors. So if this object is empty, then we'll proceed. But now let's see how validation works. So let's create our validate function. It takes data, and it's boilerplate code. So first I'm going to define errors to equal empty object, and then I'm going to return errors back. So in between this, I'm going to check if my data is valid. So for example, if not data password, that means that it is empty. So I just do errors password equals can't be blank. And you can do all kinds of validations here. So too short, doesn't have any special symbols, etc. And we need, of course, to validate email, and I use for that usually validator. So let's install it right here, yarn add validator. Okay. So now here at the top, I'm going to import the whole validator for now. Validator from validator. Okay. And now in my validate, I just check if not validator is email data email. So if it's not valid, errors email equals invalid email, for example. Okay, so this is the validation. So what happens here? When I submit the form, I run this function, I validate data and compose this errors object. So if everything's okay, this errors object will be empty, and that means that, okay, we're gonna pass this data further. But if we have something in the errors object, then we do not do anything else. But we need to display, to render this message to the user. So for that, I think I'm gonna create another component, and I will call it inline error. And we're gonna place it in messages. Yeah, inline error. Okay, so let's create one in messages, because Semantic UI doesn't have any kind of inline errors. It has the huge error message or just message object and message component, but doesn't have any kind of small things like I usually prefer to do with the forms. So we have inline error.js. Functional component, it will take some text and it will render this text, but not in div. Instead it will do it in span, and in span here we'll just use the some kind of a color. So we'll have style, and inside of the style we have color, and let's have a look what kind of color we want. So here in Semantic UI we have messages, and in messages, I'm gonna open here. In messages we have this red color. So I'm gonna cheat here. I'm gonna take picker, and I'm gonna choose this one. Okay. Now here I'm just gonna paste it. Boom, done. As you can see, linter doesn't know what is this text, so we need to define prop types. So let's import prop types, and then we'll have the prop types def. I have special things for this, and we define text prop type string is required. Another thing is, again, linter wants us to be specific, so let's please machine once more. Yarn add prop types. Okay. So we have inline error. So let's go back to our form and we use it. So right here after input, we're gonna check. So if errors, we don't have errors. So let's get it from state errors. So if errors email has something in it, so it's not undefined, then we want to use inline error with text to be errors.email. And I'll do the same thing for this. Okay, I do not need. Okay, so instead of email here, I'll have password. So this way, if we have something in our state, in errors object, we render it. Let's have a look. So I'm gonna just clean this stuff. Clean it, submit, and yeah, we have it, invalid email. Another thing that we can add is the styling for the whole component. So in Semantic UI, you have error attribute in the form field. So if you have error like this, it will become red. So it's Boolean, right? So here I'm just convert into Boolean errors.email, and here I will convert into Boolean errors.password. Save it. Doop, doop, doop. And now log in, and you can see it changes the styling of the component as well. Nice. So this is validation. Coolzy. Next thing is to pass data into the submit function. So right here, first of all, we need to check if this errors object is empty or not. And there are two ways to do that, maybe even more actually, but usually what I do, either to use lodash, is empty method, or to use ES6 or ES7 object.keys method. So let me show you. So we have object.keys and we pass errors into it. And then it will take all the keys and errors object. If this object is empty, then length should equal to 0. So this is one of the way to do that. It's not actually very beautiful. So maybe you should extract it into separate function or just use isEmpty from Lodash, but it works. Why not? Okay, so that means that data is valid. And after that, all we need to do is call this props.submit and pass this state data to it. And after that, we also will catch errors from the asynchronous request, but we will do it later. For now, all I want to do is just to call this function, pass data, and see that it works. So now this function is not defined anywhere, so let's define prop type for it. First of all, let's input prop types, and here let's prop types define, and we're gonna have submit to be prop type function. Okay, like this. So now it is required, and the parent of our component needs to pass this submit function. So our parent is this is login page. This is a Russian word for this. Okay, so we have login form here, and we need to pass submit this. Let's say submit. Oops. Submit. Now we need this function. So let's convert it to class. So we'll have class login page, and later we will connect it with Redux as well. So it extends react.component. We have render, and it returns the theme that we have here. So I'm just gonna like this. Okay, so now we can define submit. So let's do this. We'll have submit, and it will take some data. And for now, we just console.log this data into the console. So just to make sure that we get this data, and what we're gonna do here later is we're gonna dispatch thunk action, make a synchronous request, get data back, update our reduces in Redux store, and then redirect somewhere in the home page. And as you can see, the form itself doesn't know anything about it. The purpose of the form, in my opinion, is just to collect data, to validate, and then give us this data. Okay, so let's have a look. I'm gonna change password here to something. And yeah, we have our data with email and password, so we can work with it. Nice. So let's commit this change. We call it login form with client-side validation. Okay, so now we need to set up Redux and make a synchronous request, and that means that we need to set up Node.js application as well, and yeah, but we're gonna do it in the next episode. So thank you very much for your time, and if you like this episode, if you like this series, please like this video, subscribe to this channel, share this video with your friends in social networks. That really helps, and that makes my day, personally. Yeah, so thank you very much for your time, and have a great day.